Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ana Lucia Cordova. I'm Strategic Initiatives Manager at the Office of Research here at UC Davis. We at the Office of Research really value our interactions and partnerships with the national labs. In particular, we have some very active current collaborations with Lawrence Livermore and Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. And because of their geographic proximity, they tend to be the labs that most of our faculty, postdocs, and students are interested in engaging with. So we're hoping that this afternoon you'll be able to learn a little bit more about the labs in general and some of the mechanisms that they offer for faculty, students, and postdocs to engage with them. At UC Davis, if you are interested as faculty or a student in engaging with the labs, you can always reach out to our group at Strategic Initiatives. You can reach out to me, Strategic Initiatives Manager. You can reach out to Whitney, who is also here, and she's our analyst for our team. And we are happy to assist you in making any specific connections if you don't know anyone at the lab, or if you already have a partner there, but you're looking for funding or mechanisms to facilitate or enrich your partnership. So today we have two speakers. We have Bill Johansson, who is the Senior Advisor to the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab Director for Research and a very valued partner to UC Davis. We've been engaging on ongoing activities over the last couple of years, including workshops and seed funding for our faculty interested with working with Lawrence Berkeley. And then from Lawrence Livermore National Lab, we have Eric Schwegler, who is the recently appointed Director of University Relations and Science Education at Lawrence Livermore Lab. So this afternoon, what we're going to do is take some time for both Bill and Eric to provide about 15-minute presentations about the labs, facilities, and mechanisms for engagement. And then we'll open it up for questions for people who are here in the room and for those who are joining us over Zoom. So we're going to start looking at Lawrence Livermore. Thank you, Bill.
That's right. Thank you, Alicia. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining. And Alicia, in her introduction, referred to me as Lawrence Livermore, but we're used to it. No, that's okay. That's the great thing is with the labs. And that's one of the great things about the UC system is there are 3 national labs that are part of the system. So it's great to have that resource here. So I'm going to do a few slides about the national labs, about Berkeley, and then talk a little bit more about some of the research and some of the mechanisms. And then, we have the Q&A. I'm happy to dive deeper into it. Okay, so this is a chart that was made by the National Lab Directors in about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's to put into context the 17 Department of Energy National Labs. The great thing about the 17 labs is they all are very different, but there are some things that are common and some aspects that are different. So this is not precise, and since this is a few years old, things are probably shifted. But the labs range from discovery science to technology development. You also have some single program science labs like Fermi Lab, Princeton Plasma, and Jefferson Lab in Virginia. Some multi-purpose science labs, Berkeley, Brookhaven, Argonne, Oak Ridge. And then you have the multi-purpose security labs, Livermore, Los Alamos, Sandia. And then you get into the environmental labs, which is Savannah River in South Carolina. Let's just give you some context of kind of all of the different types of labs that are out there. And there's another slide that they have, which also went into, all of these are managed, except for the exception of one lab. All these are managed by a partner. And so for Lawrence Berkeley Lab, it's the University of California on its own. For Livermore, there is an LLC that manages it, with UC being one of the primary partners, and the same with Los Alamos. And so it's a mix. Some of the entities that manage the labs for DOE are nonprofits. Several are education or education affiliated, which I think is a great connection the labs have. So a little bit about Berkeley's history. So Lawrence was a professor on the Berkeley campus, and he was building his accelerators. And he eventually wanted to build an accelerator that was larger than the campus could handle. So down here in the lower corner is the old lab. This was his original lab on the Berkeley campus. And so this is the 60-inch cyclotron that was built. And he wanted to build a 184-inch cyclotron. So the university said, there's some property up the hill, why don't you go ahead and use that? So above the stadium, this is an old picture you can kind of see there. You can see all of the open space at the time. Actually, my dad grew up in Albany. He remembers as a kid riding his bicycle up one of the roads and seeing this strange thing being built up on the hill. And of course, quickly turning back around because at that time, you had no idea what was going on. And so that's kind of the beginnings of Berkeley Lab, but first on campus and then up the hill. This is one of our, we used to use this more regularly as one of our iconic pictures to represent the team science approach that Lawrence took. So in this picture, you have not only the engineers and the researchers, but you have the secretaries, the technicians, everybody together that were working on the cyclotron. If you look in this picture on the top of the magnet, or the yoke, you have, I think, McMillan, you have Oppenheimer, you have Seaboard, you have a lot of the early luminaries of the lab. So the lab has changed in those 90 years since Lawrence started it in the 40s. So today, these are our 6 primary research areas. We have biosciences, energy technologies, earth and environmental sciences, physical sciences, basic energy sciences, and our computing sciences area. So those would be sort of the equivalent of schools in a campus environment. We have associate laboratory directors that oversee each of those areas. So it'd be kind of the equivalent of today we have our research budget, and there's a slide next, so I'll go into a little more detail. Our research budget is about $1.1 billion, which has been an increase over the last several years, which has been great. We have about 4,000 staff and probably about another 2,000 visitors at any given time. I'd say on our site, but since we're still hybrid, we're not all on the site at the same time. So this is a little bit of a breakdown of our budget. As you'll see, the vast majority of it is Department of Energy Office of Science. We do have some ERE funding from the Department of Energy, as well as environmental management, fossil energy, and NSA. And then up at the top is our strategic partnerships projects. So that would be some of the funding we may get from our partners in the academic settings or others. For our NIH funding, our Department of Defense funding is for instance, our breast cancer research program. And so this growth is it's been pretty steady. That's the one thing with us being both a discovery science and an applied technology lab. We are able to overall weather some of the changes that are coming. Now, it doesn't mean that our programs individually sometimes don't see some big swings, but overall the lab tends to have a positive trajectory. So these are our 6 strategic priorities right now for the lab. We're about ready to add a 7th in here, which is focusing on our applied technologies, our carbon neutrality. So chemistry and material sciences, computing sciences, biology and environmental science, and our fundamental physics. Those 4 corners, they really correlate with our primary funders at the Office of Science in the Department of Energy. So that's kind of where we build these kind of long-term priority areas. And in the center is our focus on recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce for the future, as well as our infrastructure renewal. We just celebrated our 90th anniversary at the lab, and I think we just finally got rid of some of our original buildings. We'll be building some new buildings. But that means our oldest buildings now are probably from 1950, so they're not exactly modern and new. On the other hand, I just was at a topping off ceremony for our bioethic building, which is our biology and environmental project integration center, which we're bringing both our biology and our environmental science teams together to look at things at the environment at scale. So start from the microbial all the way to the ecosystem level. It's kind of the first of its kind that the Department of Energy invested in, so we're really looking forward to seeing the science that comes out of that. It's also interesting because it's 2 different associate laboratory director areas. And so you can envision this as the same thing as 2 two schools on campus coming together to build a building together. So there's a lot of fun in that. So this is, we recently had a visit from one of the UC regents. We put the slide together just to talk about some of our challenges that we're working through at the lab. We're focusing on the circular water economy. We just have NOWI, which is the National Alliance for Water Innovation. It's a new center that the Department of Energy has centered at the lab, but there's partners across the UC system as well as across the country. We have a quantum systems accelerator, and this is a very exciting element. It's actually centered at the Berkeley lab, but there's strong ties to the Berkeley campus as well as some of the other campuses as well. But I know that there's a partnership that Davis is involved in with the Quantum Center as well. Our Joint Bioenergy Institute is looking at carbon to products. So how do we convert forest biomass into fuels? There's this incredible truck that they pull into some of these areas to see how they can make that happen. And of course, climate mitigation and resilience. And I'd say all of these, I mentioned a few, but all of these have partnerships here at Davis as well as across the UC system. So I get a lot of opportunity that we have to partner. We're also home to several big user facilities that the Department of Energy funds. So in the upper left is the Advanced Light Source, which is a leading accelerator. This is actually physically in the same building that Lawrence's 184-inch cyclotron was built. The dome is actually a historic national landmark. Right now we have about 579 users from California. There's another slide that will show by campus where our users come from. We also have high performance for DOE Science and NERSC, the National Energy Science Research Computer. Our Joint Genome Institute, which is there in the center, that is where our part of the Human Genome Project in partnership with Livermore Los Alamos. This is kind of the next generation from that facility that was at Walnut Creek, is now on our site. We have the Molecular Foundry. This was a nano center that was built about 10 or 11 years ago. And what's interesting about this is not only a unique facility where each floor has a different level of concept. And so basically from the first floor all the way through our imaging microscopy center, you can take something from multiple layers of research. But it also is one where the individuals working at the facility spend half their time helping users and half their time doing their own research. So it really is one of those that individuals who come and work at the Molecular Foundry are working with some of the experts in the field side by side. And our ESNet is the network for the energy sciences facilities across the country. Now, all of these are user facility centers that have open calls and anyone can access these. Right now, this is our as of 2021, our current user base for those facilities. We also have some facilities that aren't at the national user facility level. There is our Flex Lab, which is something that our energy technologies area has built, which allows you to demonstrate in a built environment the different adaptations you can have. You compare side by side kind of a test facility with different heating and cooling of windows side by side with the traditional to see the impact and effectiveness. That was really derived from some of our work that our Windows technology group had done with builders. As they're building and speccing out buildings, they think certain things will lead to certain energy efficiencies. But once they build it, they realize it didn't work out the way they thought, so they have to adjust. This is a way for some of these tests to occur before anything is actually built. Just briefly, here's some additional collaborations we've had over time with Davis as well as some of the other UC campuses. Again, just I wanted to put this up there to show that we're anxious to partner with the UC campuses. Even though we are geographically in Berkeley, we have partnerships across the system. And so definitely looking to grow that more. One of the other areas that we've been working over the years, especially recently, is seeing the lab as a part of the pipeline for the workforce. We have quite a number of postdocs. We have 537 LBNL postdocs well as another 136 from UCs that come as affiliates, usually with their professors or some other our faculty researchers. We're very fortunate to have a large number of faculty researchers who have the primary appointment on one of the UC campuses, but then they also have an appointment with us. That was a slide that goes into a little bit. There's kind of different mixes that we have with that. Okay, so this is a lot of text, but I know these slides will probably be available elsewhere, but I wanted to put this in here too, just to talk a little bit about the kinds of appointments we have. So from the start, I mean, that Lawrence was a faculty member, we kind of had this strong partnership with the campuses and having this, to us, it's an important part of our research environment and ecosystem to have these close ties to campuses. And so we have appointments that parallel our staff scientists and senior scientists as faculty scientists and senior faculty scientists. And so it's an important part of how we can integrate our faculty partners into the lab. And with that, as a joint faculty, as a shared faculty, you are a researcher at the lab. So you have a ID card, which I don't bring mine with me, which is more about just being able to access buildings. Since we're unclassified, there's no area specifically that is separate and to get into, but it is something that is important to be able to get access to the site. Let me see this one. I'll skip on to this next one, which actually explains a little bit in better detail. Actually, what we put this together, which from a lot of conversations we had, she was able to kind of distill this down. And so on the far left, you see the different kinds of appointment categories. So on the bottom, I'll start with the one that we refer to as joint. I think most people would refer to anything that is shared between us and the campus as joint. But this is one that in 2012, the lab at UC Davis signed an MOU to have what we're calling joint appointments, meaning that they are jointly hired, jointly sourced. And that is one where it's a 50% appointment at the lab and it's a 50% appointment at the campus. And so it's a little bit of a unique situation. You have an MOU with Davis, with Berkeley, and now with Merced. And so where we have these in place. That being said, that's just one of the mechanisms. And actually for years, we have had many of the other kinds, the shared and the faculty scientists. So this, I say that because a lot of people focus on the joint 50-50 split, but actually these others I think actually have a lot more dynamic and a lot more flexibility. So we have everything from the top one, which is our faculty scientists, that they're fully on the UC campus. They don't necessarily do any specific work at the lab, but they are part of the division at the lab and part of the intellectual environment and the engagement there. And then from kind of a sliding scale, you could have a faculty scientist or appointment where you get, you're at the campus on your academic year and you can get summer salary from the lab. Or there's ones where it's kind of a mix throughout the year. And so again, there's a lot of different approaches to this in terms of the way the appointments will work. So adds flexibility, but also a little bit of, a lot of different things to choose from. So we just wanted to kind of share that with you all. This is another aspect. So as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot with the workforce development. So our workforce development and education group has several Department of Energy managed programs. These are highlighted on the side here. Some of these also, I'm sure Eric will talk about some similar programs that they may have at Livermore. But everything from undergraduate internships to Gen Fellows. We also have visiting faculty programs that, these are generally funded by the Department of Energy and the programs that these folks will be a part of. And so this is the website for these and several other opportunities that we have there to bring undergraduate and graduate students to the lab. There's other opportunities, as obviously I was talking about, we've been working with Prasant's office to come up with other opportunities to fund joint programs. What we find, and to me, what's kind of the key to establishing a longer term relationship is just starting that relationship. It's funds to come spend time in each other's lab. to see what's going on, to learn a technique as a starting point, or send a postdoc or a graduate student to learn a technique, and then build that working relationship from there. So in 5 years ago, Director Witherall stood up in an IDEA office and appointed our first chief diversity officer at the lab. And from that, we've also grown the stewardship principles at the lab, which is respect, service, innovation, trust, and team science. This has been a really interesting forming and a common denominator that we can all use together to work together. And it's been a great kind of growth opportunity, and have allowed us to have different conversations on both the science side as well as the operation side, and where the two meet in the middle. So in terms of our intellectual property, we have the cyclotron mode accelerator, which was an innovation that was started several years ago by some former ARPA-E program managers who came to the lab. And it's basically a way to bring small entrepreneurs into the lab, allow them to be at the lab for 2 years, take their technology and kind of move it through the valley of the death as far as they could, to get it to a higher TRL level and someplace they can spin out. And this at the bottom here is just several of the companies that have come into and come out of Cyclotron Road. I know Argonne and Oak Ridge National Labs, I think PNL up in Washington State have similar programs now. It's a really interesting opportunity to leverage the national labs as a resource for entrepreneurs. And this is a picture of our flex lab here. This is actually a turntable, and it turns 280 degrees. So you can even set it up so that the windows have a different sun profile. You want to see if it's facing west, so it's acting in sun, or if you want it a little bit different. It's a really cool operation. And next to it is another one that doesn't turn, but it's small. It's a one-story. And then next to that is actually, it's a 2-story. It's supposed to replicate a warehouse environment. So how do we make our Costco's a little bit more energy efficient with all that space at the top? So it's a pretty a fun tool. And that's my last slide. I'll take questions at the end.
Next, we'll hear from Eric. Just need some support.
It's set up here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not here in person with you guys today. Didn't work out as planned, but hopefully this will work okay. And I think we're probably all quite used to hybrid meetings this day. So hopefully we can get this all across okay. As they said in the introduction, I'm Eric Schwegler. I'm currently the director of the University Relations and Science Education program at Lawrence Livermore. So go ahead and advance the slide, please. So as Bill mentioned, there's 17 national labs, and so Lawrence Livermore is one of those 17. In particular, we're one of the 3 multi-purpose national security labs. So we've been around for a while. We were established back in 1952. We currently have a little over 8,200 employees. The unique thing about Livermore compared to some of the other labs is that we're actually located on a 1 mile square campus out in, as you might guess, as the name implies, in Livermore, California. So this is an aerial shot of it. And it's, so we're really compact, and we'd like to joke that we probably have the highest concentration of PhDs anywhere in the world on our 1 mile square campus. Our annual budget is about 2.8 billion. It's been steadily increasing or growing over the last, I'd say, 7 years. But we're currently at a 2.8 billion. And as Bill mentioned, each of the labs, except for one, is operated by an LLC or some organization. In our case, Lawrence Livermore is operated by LINS, which is the Lawrence Livermore National Security. It includes UC California, or sorry, University of California. I'm being a little redundant there, as well as other organizations like Bechtel, BWXT, and so on. So go ahead and click the next slide. I won't say much about this, but in addition to our main campus, which is out in Livermore, we also have a test site that's located kind of halfway between Livermore and Tracy. And that allows us to do things like do some high explosive testing and whatnot out there as well. Go ahead, next slide. So as a national security lab, we have a pretty broad mission space, but as you can imagine, it's really focused on problems, big problems that are facing the country. So these include things like nuclear deterrence, as you might imagine. So that involves things like, making sure that our nuclear weapons stockpile are safe and reliable, to a variety of other areas that we focus on, like threat preparedness and response. We do quite a bit of work in climate and energy resilience, as well as this last one here, which is integrated deterrence and competition. So this is sort of an interesting mix of things like ranging from policy, technology, and operational approaches in order to do things like make advanced decision making for different folks. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Now, to support these missions at the lab, if you back up one, please. I think you went, there you go. To support these, the mission space that we have identified at Livermore, we invest heavily in 7 different core competency areas that I have listed up here. So this is where a lot of our institutional resources go to support these areas and make sure that we have the resources and the staff available to really stay at the forefront of each one of these areas. So these include topics like high energy density science, advanced materials and manufacturing, biosciences, bioengineering, nuclear, chemical, and isotopic S&T, lasers and optical S&T, as well as earth and atmospheric science. And sort of supporting all of those areas, one of the things that we really invest heavily in is in high performance computing, simulation, and data sciences. So these represent sort of the key areas at the lab where you'll find some very interesting capabilities and facilities that we've brought to bear to make sure that we're really at the forefront of each one of these. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. So along with those core competency areas, one of the things that really serves an important role in engaging with the outside world, especially say universities and colleges, is through our institutes and centers that we've stood up. And so this provides a very outward-looking sort of view with the rest of the world, and allows us to engage through a lot of different internship programs and students and whatnot. And so we currently have a variety of different institutes and centers that are active. These include things like the High Energy Density Science Center, the Center for Global Security Research, Accelerator Mass Spectrometry, Engineered Materials and Manufacturing, Applied Scientific Computing, Center for Bioengineering, the Glenn Seaborg Institute. One of the newer centers that we've stood up over the last couple of years is one focused on materials for energy that we should call LEAF, and so on. So there's a variety of different centers and institutes available at Livermore. And each one of these slides, you may notice I have a web link that you can go to and get more information on any one of these centers, as well as listings of the various student internships or other, let's say, workshops or events that any one of our centers or institutes are hosting. So I encourage you, if you're interested in any one of these topics, to please go to the website there, and you can get a lot more detailed information about what opportunities are currently available for each one of those. Okay, go ahead and advance the slide, please. So the other interesting thing about Livermore is that we really do have a multidisciplinary workforce. And so the The wedge shape here just represents the breakdown of our technical staff at the lab. As you can see, it's an interesting mix of engineers, math, computer science, physics, physical sciences, biosciences even. And like I mentioned at the beginning, a really high concentration of PhDs that are on our site. The small wedge here is kind of hard to see. It actually represents our postdoc population. So if you go to the next slide, we actually have over 300 postdocs at the lab right now. So we have a very vibrant postdoc program. I do a lot of events and activities across the lab in support of our postdocs. The other kind of interesting thing about our postdoc program is that each of the postdocs gets an account where they can spend up to 25% of their time for professional development, which is kind of interesting. And the other thing that you should take notice of is that when we bring in postdocs at Livermore, a very high fraction of them end up staying at the lab for their career. So we have a very high conversion rate. It's currently about 60%. Over the last year, it actually went up to about 80% at one time. So a lot of the postdocs end up staying. There are many opportunities to take on staff positions at the lab, which is really great opportunity if you're thinking about that sort of a career path. It's a nice mix too of it says we're about 30% of the postdocs right now are foreign nationals and 35% are women. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier too, that the lab has been growing pretty significantly over the last say 7 years or so, and so we've been hiring rapidly and lots of opportunities out there for applying for positions at the lab. One of the kind of the cool things I liked about this view graph here are all the little spikes that you see, sort of periodically appear in the summertime. So go ahead, click the advance one more, please. What that represents are the students that come in through the lab each year, mostly through the summertime for our sort of targeted internship programs. So if you go ahead and advance one more, please. And on any given year nowadays, we have over 1,200 students come through the lab that are able to engage in a broad range of research activities. So these include sort of targeted research programs, such as the one on the column on the left here, some of the current ones that we have for things like nuclear forensics, data science, Summer Institute, computational chemistry, material science is one that I've been involved with directly for many years. It's actually been in existence, I think, for over 20 years now. Our computation scholar program and global security research summer program, and finally the high energy density physics summer program are all ongoing targeted research opportunities that will bring together groups of students, whether at the undergraduate or mostly at the graduate level, I would say, to come out to the lab to work on our sort of focused areas of research. So along with those targeted programs, as Bill mentioned earlier, all the labs, actively bring in students through externally funded programs as well. A lot of them across the Department of Energy. So these include things like the SULI program, the Office of Science graduate fellowships, various NNSA laboratory residency graduate fellowships, and DOE computational science graduate fellowships, as well as at Livermore, we also take a number of students through the Stewardship Science Academic Alliance program, and of course the Graduate Education for Minorities program as well, the GEM program. So if you, as I mentioned, I did include some links here, so you can go to, if you were to click on this web link, it would list all of the different fellowship opportunities or internship opportunities we have in a given year. Okay, please go ahead and advance the slide. Another important program that we've been involved with is through the UC National Lab Fees Research Program. So as I mentioned, Lawrence Livermore is operated by LINS, which includes UC as one of the major parts of LINS. And so what happens is that the money that UC receives to manage the lab actually gets funneled back into doing research, or a big fraction of it. So this supports things like multi-campus national lab collaborations. So every other year or so, there'll be a call to establish these large multi-campus collaborations. The current ones that were funded just last year are listed here. And you can see UC Davis is, of course, included in many of these collaborations. And so that happens about, I think it happens every other year these days. There'll be a call for that. There was just one last year. Every year, though, there's also an in-residence graduate fellowship call to the same program. And what this does is it provides graduate students who are working on their PhD 2 to 3 years of funding so that they conduct research in residence at the National Lab. So in this case, this supports research at both Lawrence Livermore or Los Alamos National Lab. And I just wanted to mention this because the call currently is open right now for this program. Letters of intent are due June 2nd, full proposals in September, and then it would start in April 1st of 2023. So we had a webinar just the other day to kind of go over some of the aspects of this program. I would just wanted to mention that one of the sort of hard things to navigate as a, say, graduate student to this program is identifying a suitable host at the National Lab that you could work with. And so if any of you are interested in this program, but you're just kind of struggling about who you should reach out to, I would just mention that I'm more than happy to help you navigate that. And if you're just send me an email or a note, and I'll with a brief description of what you're interested in, I'll try to point you in the right direction within the lab. I know that can always be a difficult thing to navigate if you're not really familiar with the inner workings of the lab. Okay, go ahead and advance the next slide, please. A new program that we just stood up fairly recently, I think this was stood up in 2018, was a mini faculty sabbatical program. And so what this provides is an opportunity for university professors to come and work at Lawrence Livermore for either up to 1 to 3 months at a time. It's a paid appointment at the lab, and it allows you to the professor or to come and learn a new skill at the lab, as well as to it sort of goes both ways. You can also educate our staff employees about the kind of research that you're working on. So this has been going on for a couple of years now. It's turned out to be a really vibrant and exciting program where we're bringing in faculty from across the U.S. And this is the current cohort of folks that are coming this year. So we'll be hosting 9 faculty members in this year. And as I mentioned earlier, I have the links down here at the bottom where if you're interested in these types of research opportunities, feel free to read all the details online, as well as to get in touch with me if you'd like to send in an application for this type of program. Okay, go ahead and advance to the next slide. So in addition, what I didn't prepare a review graph on was, in addition to supporting sabbaticals of university professors to come to the lab, we also do the reverse. So we have a similar program where we can send Livermore staff employees out to university campuses to work for up to a year at a time. And so if there's interest in those sort of research opportunities of having a Livermore staff come out and be in residence at any one of the campuses, those programs exist as well. But in addition to those types of opportunities, we also have put together a series of lectures that really highlight some of the key areas of the lab. And we sort of team these up with folks that are really considered to be sort of the pioneers in the area for each one. And those lectures are available, or those speakers are available to come out and visit the UC campuses and provide an overview of different aspects of what Lawrence Livermore is working on. So they include things like Tammy Ma talking about using the National Ignition Facility, to our high intensity laser research program, advanced manufacturing, hydrodynamics and high energy density, modeling high energy density matter, to people like Brian Spears talking about our machine learning program, as well as our Elizabeth Wheeler talking about the bioengineering and detection programs we have here. So if any of these talks are of interest to you guys, then feel free to reach out, and we can arrange to have one of our ambassadors come by and give you an overview of these programs. And we're looking to add a couple additional talks this year too, so I'll keep you updated as those develop. Okay, go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. So I think that we're getting here towards the end. So I'll just briefly mention that Lawrence Livermore, as I mentioned, is one of the national security labs. So it's an interesting mix of classified and unclassified research. And so one of the things we've been working on very actively is to develop different approaches for better engaging with the outside world, or making it easier to form collaborations and partnerships with the outside world. So this is part of our sort of open innovation program that we've been working on. And so this box here in the middle is just represents that 1 mile square campus. And the cutout on the side there is this area that we refer to as the Livermore Valley Open Campus, where we've set up a number of sort of interesting and unique facilities that are outside of the main fence and make it much easier to bring in collaborators and visitors to meet with us and work with us together and form collaborations. So if you go ahead and click one more time, two examples of this are the Advanced Manufacturing Laboratory that's out there in the open campus, as well as I think many of you are probably familiar with Hertz Hall because of the role that UC Davis played in that. It's currently being renovated by UCOP. So and I think it's actually scheduled to complete the renovations tomorrow. But this actually will be opening it up to all of the UC campuses as a collaboration center. So there'll be many opportunities for you to come out there and work within the collaboration center, and not only with Lawrence Livermore, but with all the other UC campuses will have access to the facility now. So we're really looking forward to opening that up here in the very near future. Okay, I believe that is my last slide. Yeah, so be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Do we have any questions from the audience in the room?
Yeah, so I'm well, first of all, thanks for all the information. I much appreciate it. So I'm a postdoc here at UC Davis in the Department of Radiology. And if I wanted to go to Livermore, Berkeley for half a year or a year, so what would you recommend are the first steps that I should take to make that possible? Either one of you.
Let's start with Bill and then we'll go
Okay.
to Eric.
Yeah, no, so the first step would be to find a connection to a research group that would be of interest to you. I think that's the key to that. So I know, through the partnerships office, we've been trying to do more about bringing our associate lab directors and deans together to find some opportunities. And so I know we're on the listserv here, and we're trying to do the same there, just opportunities to find out what's going on in some other research groups. But with that, once you find that connection, I always tell a lot of folks it's very personality driven in the sense of making those direct connections. And so that's where myself and our office, we can work with you to see to make those connections. So we can follow up and find what's your specific area. It sounds like it probably potentially be in our we can find out which of our areas would be good to explore further with you. If you have a fellowship that you can bring with you, then that is very streamlined. But even there are some opportunities for some funded positions as well.
Thank you.
Eric?
Sure, I would just echo what Bill said, in that the key is really to identify a research group or a staff scientist at the lab that's closely aligned with the kind of things you're interested in working on. And that can be, like I said in my presentation, that could be a daunting process to understand. With so much activity going on at the lab, it can be hard to find where those individuals are. We have a lot of information online, but it's somewhat difficult to navigate to find that individual or that research group. So I would encourage you to take a look at our university relations website. It has a lot of links on this, like the various institutes and centers, which is a really great place to start. I think those are the real key areas that we really focus on internally at the lab. And each one of those centers or institutes has a long list of different opportunities to come either through a paid position or through as a visiting scientist to come into the lab and work with folks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I know that the program that Eric mentioned, that it's run through UC Office of the President for fellowships. I know Berkeley does not participate in that one. Is there an equivalent mechanism that interesting students and postdocs to look at.
Right. So the programs that Eric mentioned, those were designed to encourage collaboration between the campuses with Livermore and Los Alamos. And so the fee that's used for those programs comes from UC's management fee at those two labs. So that's why we aren't a primary partner in those, because our fee is not part of that contribution. But as you saw on the list that Eric shared, we can be a second lab. And so that's where a lot of the strong events, several of those, it's Livermore and Berkeley, and sometimes, even Los Alamos all together working with several of the campuses. So it's a great way to pull together some of these teams between labs and the campuses to solve some really interesting problems. Usually there's one or two topic areas that the call comes out looking for specific. I know wildfire has been one in the last year or so. But there's usually a process, and usually with the vice chancellors of research, they'll kind of workshop what are some of the areas that we want to focus the program. So there's some opportunity to see what what might be of interest to researchers here at Davis to influence some of the topics. It's a great program. Yeah.
So if people were interested in finding out activities or opportunities to engage with the lab, is there a place where they could find out, for example, is there an open house, or is there a webinar or any like workshops or things that they could participate in to get a little bit more firsthand exposure to researchers and work at the labs? Eric, should do first.
Did you say I should go first? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we one of the interesting ones that we've been we're doing it for postdocs is a research slam. I don't know if you guys have heard about that. It started off as a internal Livermore competition of having postdocs give short sort of presentations about the research that they're interested in. But this has been broadened out to include Lawrence Berkeley and SLAC and Livermore now. So we have a research slam event coming up. That's sort of interesting way to get, like, if you want to get a very quick, I think they're on the order of 2-minute presentations or so of many different topics that our postdoc population is working on. I would encourage you to attend that event. It's really a fun event, and you get to hear some really outstanding presentations, although very short, but very interesting presentations. So there are things like that, as well as, of course, we host a lot of visitors every day, basically, at the lab. So there are opportunities to do things like come out and take a tour of the National Ignition Facility. That's fairly easy to set up. That's one of the most, I would say, one of the more interesting tours to take a look at because of the sheer size and complexity of a facility like that, as well as just coming out and throughout the summer. Of course, we have a lot of events that are targeted more towards students and interns that we can make available. If you see one that's of particular interest in terms of like a lecture series, there are opportunities to actually bring you in and let you participate in some of those opportunities as well. And so those things are all listed on our university relations website. If you want to take a look at that'd be a great place to start for us.
Yeah, and I'd say similarly, what I find sometimes there's so much going on that even some parts of the lab don't know what the other parts of the lab are doing. So, but as Eric's saying too, there's a lot on our website, but that's can kind of be daunting. I know that there is, I'm trying to remember the web link off the top of my head, but and I'll send it to, I don't see it to share, but each of our 6 research areas have a strategic plan. And so that's kind of one glimpse into, at least at that moment in time, the direction they saw in their research. But I think a lot of the problems in the research that they're working on are very dynamic and very, as soon as you do a strategic plan, it's already old by the time it's printed. But at least it kind of gives you a concept of where they're going, and you can drill down further into that research area to see more of the researchers that are doing the research and what they're working on. There is a calendar that lists of all of the different talks that are going on, but again, can kind of be overwhelming. As I think we ran into that because even one of the calendars we have, you have the staff yoga sessions on it, which is probably way more information than what you want. So that is probably one area that we're actually going through a web redesign. And we're trying to find more about, instead of having one website that satisfies both the internal audience, the external audience, and the Department of Energy, that's a little bit more customized. So depending on, if you're trying to find out more about a research, you can get that information more quickly. So we're not quite there yet. We're still probably on a Dreamweaver format on their website, but that's another story.
Yes.
I was wondering what's the level of interest in biomedical technologies, like doing collaborations to develop biomedical technologies?
So before joining the directorate 10 years ago, I was actually in the biosciences area, the life sciences division at the time. So that is something. So we still have a strong kind of human health side of our biology that we're looking at as well. I do know that we look at that in terms of the overall environmental health. We had a very strong cancer research program for many years. That has kind of waned a little bit in part because the researchers have moved on, and the funding from NIH and CL Fund now getting harder and harder to get. But that's definitely something. We have a nuclear medicine group that's looking at imaging technologies that have been used. Started actually by Lawrence's brother John Lawrence. That's kind of the descendants of that it's used for human health, but it's also using for imaging cylinders of soil to see what's going on at that. So trying to use that, so that there is still some elements of that there. I know that I think Livermore has been doing more like some of these areas too.
That's true. I think, I used to, before I moved over to university relations, I was actually in charge of sponsored science, which meant that I oversaw a lot of the Office of Science investments at Livermore. And I thought it was always interesting for folks to learn that out of the 6 Office of Science areas at Livermore, our largest is actually biological and environmental research out of the 6. And because it's a lot of climate modeling, but it's also a lot of biosciences as well. And so we do things like, developing neural implants, using, developing flexible electrodes for things like that, to, combining different fields, like using additive manufacturing to print biomaterials. A lot of work on high performance computing using modeling and simulation to do things in the biosciences areas. So it's a very active program actually at Livermore. It's one of those areas that people don't necessarily expect when they think about the main missions of Livermore. But once you look into the details, there's actually a tremendous amount of research going on in that area at the lab.
I think that's usually one of the surprises folks have, is that the Human Genome Project is actually a Department of Energy program. It was a jointly between Livermore, Los Alamos, and Berkeley. And that DOE is also the big computing funding agency of the federal government. But you wouldn't think energy and computing, but now we know with the modeling and all the systems that it is key there. I know that the technology that eventually led to Jennifer Doudna's CRISPR discovery, we actually funded it initially through a laboratory directed research and development program. And so that's one of those we liked. I know Livermore has LDRD program as well. That's where it's kind of an investment fund in the sense of trying to take technology that's not, or research that meets a little proof of principle. And just it led to some really great, exciting research.
Go ahead.
A strategic question. It seems like most of your programs and services are technology based. And I'm wondering whether the administration or the university partners at any point sit down and generate basic questions that need to be supported and encouraged, as opposed to what's the hottest technology that we need to jump on. In particular, I think the question that I struggle with a lot is, what is the timeline and the major components to global heating that may push us into an extinction state. And I don't see that anyplace out on the government sites. I would sort of expect Lawrence Berkeley Lab, since I've been there and worked there, to be in the forefront of that. And yet I didn't see, other than tangentially mixing, touching rather, that issue.
Well, there's definitely, you know, I probably didn't do our full portfolio justice in this. That's, in fact, there's a, Carol Burns is the Deputy Lab Director of Research. She just started in August. At a retreat, she actually came up with this diagram, which she's been putting in her presentations that talk about this continuum between discovery science and applied, and how that, you know, you need that whole spectrum. And, you know, so a lot of this might, you know, I think probably is more towards the applied side, and a lot of that is trying to solve the problems, but we have full teams looking at some of the try not to call it basic science, because it's basic research, discovery research, because that's where you're starting to get then the questions that need to be asked underneath that. So in terms of, you know, your questions around that, I know our Earth and Environmental Science group, they do have some analysis that's going on. Also our Energy Technologies group. There's a lot of, even though they're an applied division, a lot of what they're doing is modeling and analysis that goes on. So there's a little bit of, there's kind of a mix of both, because you need the whole, you know, the whole ecosystem to understand.
Yeah, but nobody's putting it all together. That's the issue, I think.
Yeah.
So I could say a few things too. So as Bill mentioned earlier, the labs have access to what we call our LDRD program, a Laboratory Directed Research and Development Program. And that basically is, we take, you know, in our case at Livermore, we take 6% of all the money that comes into the lab, we tax it and fund it into this LDRD program. Individual staff scientists can propose research, you know, proposals that are more on the development side. A lot of it is very fundamental S&T work, and that can fund, you know, up to 3 years at a time, you know, work in those areas, depending on you know what's proposed each year, of course. And so that's a really important mechanism for us for doing this more of exploratory research. Within climate science, as I mentioned, we actually have a very healthy climate program at the lab. There's a couple things I'll mention there. So in addition to our LDRD program, we also have declared sort of directors initiatives in certain research areas. And one of them in particular is on engineering the carbon economy. And so it's a lot of work that's involved, focused directly on developing technologies for creating global scale CO2 removal approaches. And finally, I'll just also mention that we participated really heavily in a recent report that was done for Sacramento. It was titled Getting to Neutral, basically. It basically was a very lengthy report on explaining, you know, what you would need to do in order to get, you know, if you really wanted to achieve the sort of going to neutral in terms of carbon in the US. And so that report was just delivered. You know, we had a lot of lab scientists participate directly in putting that together. So we participate in activities like that in terms of like outlining the plan of how we actually get there.
Thank you both. We're a little bit over time. I just want to thank both of our speakers for the time they took to talk to us today. I hope you are walking away today with some actionable information about how you can engage with the labs. Mm-hmm. If there's anything Office of Research at UC Davis can do to assist you in identifying partners or getting access to some of the resources that both Bill and Eric mentioned today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Whitney, who is present here today. Part of our role is to help our faculty and facilitate these conversations so that they can achieve their research goals. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon at the OR Expo.